Okay, good afternoon or good morning.
Hi.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Hope that your holidays have been good so far, whatever holidays that you have celebrated. And question for you tonight is how many of you are going to be up tonight to watch the ball drop in Times Square?
No.
No, nobody's going to watch Ryan Seacrest tonight on ABC. The Dick Clark, even though he's been dead forever, the Dick Clark ball drop. Anyway, this is Times Square, and I'm not sure exactly what the year is, but I can tell you it's got to be before 1956 because it's Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis in the movie Three Ring Circus. Admiral TV. How many of you had an Admiral TV back in the day? So, and this place is packed, and they're waiting for the ball to drop. And we're going to talk about New York here today, and what made New York, New York. And what made New York, New York? Partly the ball drop and the subway. Happy New Year. It's 1904. We are now going back 120 years. It's 1904, and New York is a city of tremendous change. And not surprisingly, some of those changes had their beginnings in Times Square. There are two things that happened in 1904. The New York Times is losing money, and they're trying to figure out how to survive with about 17 other newspapers in New York City at that point. So they have an idea. Adolph Oaks, who owns the New York Times. And there's something else that I bet you everyone here has taken once in their life. The 4 train, the subway. How many of you have been on the subway? The 4 train. There have been people here who haven't been on the 4 train or the subway. You've never been on the train, subway?
Me?
No, her. How have you avoided ever being on the subway? So anyway, so these are the two things that transformed New York City. The city's first subway line opened October 27th, 1904. That went from the Brooklyn Bridge up to 145th Street, which is roughly now where CCNY is. Anybody go to CCNY? You went to CCNY.
Out there, 23rd Street.
You went on 23rd Street. But roughly, that's where the train ended. 145th Street, because there were only, can you imagine the Bronx was only farms? That's all the Bronx was, farmland. Can you picture the Bronx being farmland?
No.
Yeah, but it was. That's what it was. So anyway, there's the subway and the first ever celebration of New Year's Eve. And here's the subway. This is the Subway Museum. So I'm going to ask you, how many of you remember the IRT, the Interborough Rapid Transit? Also the BMT, the Brooklyn Manhattan trains, and the Hudson Manhattan tunnels, and independent subway lines. All the Gilded Age people built the subways back in those days, and it's now all under the tent of the MTA. The inaugural bash, Happy New Year's, the official opening of the new headquarters of the New York Times. In the 1890s, there was yellow journalism. There were the newspaper wars between Pulitzer and Hearst in New York. And somewhere in there is a guy by the name of Adolph Oaks, who owns the New York Times. Now, the newspaper owner is the son of German Jewish immigrants. And he goes to New York City, and he wants to build a building on this little piece of land on 42nd Street where 7th Avenue and Broadway intersect. The land is called Longacre Square, and he builds this building there, and he names it Times Square. But he's got to get the city approval before it becomes Times Square. City says yes, and all of a sudden it's Times Square. But it's no big deal. It's just got the second tallest building in Manhattan at that time, and it happens to house a newspaper. But he's got to sell that newspaper, and he's losing money on it. So he undercuts the cost of everybody else, starts selling it for a penny. A penny then, since 5 cents is $1.80 approximately, which means that it's about, I don't know, about $1.85 to about 36 cents a paper today, which is cheap considering what they sell the paper for today. And this is the ad. Ushering in the new year. Music and fireworks at midnight tonight, T-O, then an equation, night, at Broadway and 43rd Street, Times Square, celebrating the removal. They're not removing them, they moved there. Removal of the New York Times to its new building. So all of a sudden you got Times Square. Nothing has ever happened here before, and here's all of a sudden a big party. But it's not a party to celebrate New Year's Eve per se. It's a party to introduce you to the 1 cent New York Times. The inaugural bash commemorated the opening of the new New York Times headquarters, and all of a sudden you got the party. The Times Tower, which is where the ball drops today, was built on a tiny triangle of land at the intersection of 7th Avenue, Broadway, and 42nd Street. It's Manhattan's second tallest building. Here it is. This is it. This is Times Square back in 1904. Recognize it?
Yeah.
You do recognize Times
For
Square in
pictures.
1904. There are no theaters there. I mean, there's no George M. Cohan statue there. No theaters. No traffic. There's no traffic here. Here's a horse and buggy. No cars. That's what they want to go back to today. No cars in that area. And actually, they have taken away a lot of the area where you could drive from. And now they want to put congestion traffic or congestion tolls in there. Cost you $9 to go under 60th Street starting next week. But look at that. There's nothing there. There's absolutely nothing there. The theaters are not there. Nothing is there except the building. The building was the focus of an unprecedented New Year's Eve celebration, and Oak spared no expense to ensure that the party was going to be a big party, and you didn't have to pay to go there. An all-day street festival culminating in a fireworks display set off at the base of the tower. It was the start of an annual tradition, and people moved into Times Square to watch the fireworks and welcome in the year 1905. And that's what it looked like back in 1905. You had the building, you had something up here, 1905, all these people in the street, a whole bunch of fireworks. It was successful. New York celebrated big time the first New Year's Eve in 1905, the first big time New Year's Eve. It was in 1907 that the New Year's Eve ball made its maiden descent from a flagpole atop of Times Square. And people watched the ball just drop down, and wasn't really much of anything, but it was a ball. There have been 7 versions of the ball since then to signal in the new year. Dick Clark wasn't there in 1907 when this started, but it must have been somebody who was like Dick Clark. Remember, there's no radio, there's no TV, but there are movies. There are movies in that day. But
Excuse me,
yeah,
who came up with the idea for the ball?
Adolph Oakes.
Who?
Oakes, the owner of the New York Times.
How do you?
The owner of the New York Times, Adolph Oakes, came up, hey, let's do that. And they did. That is the first New Year's Eve ball back in 1907. As part of the 1907-1908 festivities, waiters in the fabled lobster palaces and other deluxe eateries in the hotels surrounding Times Square were supplied with battery-powered top hats. And on the top hats it said 1908, all from tiny light bulbs. They had the technology in those days to light up the hats, and they lit up the hats. At the stroke of midnight, they all flipped their lids, and the year on their foreheads lit up in conjunction with the numbers 1908 as the ball came down from Times Square. And it signaled the beginning of the new year. So all of a sudden, Manhattan begins to transform, starting in 1904. The subways are there. And how did people get to Times Square? By the subway. Took the subway to Times Square. Having people get to Times Square today? Take the subway. What amazes me about Times Square today is you got all those people packed in. And by the way, if you did go to Times Square, wear a diaper or have a great bladder. Because once you are put in there, you cannot get out. You cannot get out. They keep you there until the ball drops. And then the amazing thing is, you get there at 12:20, there's nobody there. They're all gone. It's like, who ate all the people up? Did they fall into the ground? Actually, they did fall into the ground. They were part of the New York subway. And there is Dick Clark, who will be resurrected tonight. Dick Clark's rocking New Year's Eve. This is 2011. He doesn't look like the world's oldest teenager by this point, does he?
Yeah.
How many of you watched American Bandstand back in the day with Dick Clark? Yeah, Dick Clark. But this is what he became famous for later on in life. And you ask people today, young people today, about Dick Clark, and it's just, well, he's a name on the New Year's Eve show. They have no idea that he was actually the host of American Bandstand back starting around, what, 1956, 57, somewhere around there. Between 1939 and 1972, you might remember this name, Ben Grauer. He was with NBC, and he covered the ball drop 34 times. ABC and CNN and other American TV networks cover the ball drop, and an international audience watches. But you know what? Starting actually now, you can watch the balls drop in New Zealand, in Australia. If you put on the TV, you can watch all the balls drop, and eventually, 7 o'clock tonight, you can see the London celebration. 6 o'clock tonight, the rest of Europe, and then all of a sudden, it's the ball drop in New York. The networks also cover Disney's ball drop and all the other parties around the country. New York, New York. So nice that they had to name it twice, and that is Federal Hall in New York. And we're going to go through a little tour of New York before you get to the ball drop today, and things that you could do, like I did on Sunday. I walked through Central Park, and I'm going to be 69 years old, and I'm a lifelong New Yorker, and I have never seen Cleopatra's Needle. Have you?
Yes.
Yeah. First time I ever saw Cleopatra's Needle was on Sunday, December 29th, 2024. So I've heard about it. There are things I have never been to in New York City, like the Empire State Building. Believe it or not, I have never been to the Empire State Building. How many of you have been to the Empire State Building? Some of you have missed it as well. That is Federal Hall, where George Washington took the oath of office to become the first president of the United States back in 1787. This is Peg Leg Pete, Peter Stuyvesant. You've heard of Peter Stuyvesant, right? Well, here's his statue, and this is in St. Martin. Down in the Caribbean, and he was brought up from St. Martin to run New York, which was called New Amsterdam back in the day. And he lost his leg, and he had a wooden leg, lost his leg in a battle. But he never saw this, the Celebrity Summit leaving Cape Liberty, which is the old naval base over in Bayonne. So he never saw this. Nor did he ever see this, the Verrazano Narrows Bridge, which I have to take occasionally and spend an arm and a leg. Sorry, Peter, no talking about your leg. Anyway, you can see that the cruise ship barely makes it underneath. And Lower Manhattan, and the best ride, free ride ever in New York, Staten Island Ferry.
Yeah.
Staten Island Ferry. I tell people to come to New York and say, forget about everything else. You want the best free attraction? Go on the Staten Island Ferry, because you get to see things like that. You also get to go to Staten Island. Well, there are always drawbacks. And also, that's David Hartman and my wife, New York, New York. Remember David Hartman?
Yes.
Well, part of this talk is because of David Hartman. David Hartman was Lucas Tanner on TV. And David Hartman also was on Good Morning America on ABC. And my daughter and his son went to the same high school, so I got to know David Hartman. And David Hartman was telling me how awful it is to deal with PBS in terms of putting together a TV show. And what he wanted to do was do a show on the streets of New York. And this is where I have taken David Hartman's idea, and we're going to talk a little bit about the streets of New York. And David was telling me that he wanted to do shows on 42nd Street, from the UN to the Hudson River, or Broadway, from the Bronx down to the Battery. And he started talking to PBS and WNET, Channel 13 here in New York, wouldn't give him any money, got some money, a little money, from WETA, Channel 20 in Washington, and there was a show or two about the streets of New York, and then Barry Lewis did some shows. Now, would you be interested if you watch PBS on shows on the streets of New York, 34th Street, or 42nd Street, or Broadway? Would you be interested in watching a show just on those streets? You would? Well, PBS said, no, we don't have the audience, they wouldn't be interested. So it hardly ever got kicked off the ground, but there's David. New York was founded in 1624. It was called New Amsterdam by 1626. Lower Manhattan was a trading post populated by the colonists of the Dutch Republic. And they hang on to it for about 40 years. By the way, the Native Americans gladly took whatever the Dutch gave them because they didn't own any land. They just lived off the land. So they figured these fools, hey, they're giving us presents for the land. Hey, there are no such things as title deeds in North America. Anyway, 1664 comes under English control. It's named New York after King Charles II granted the lands to his brother, the Duke of York. New York served as the capital of the United States from 1785 to 1790. That was a time where places like Princeton, New Jersey also was the capital of the United States. It's been the country's largest city since 1790. And Washington says, we'll see you later after the revolution at a place called Francis Tavern. How many of you been down there? It's a bar in the museum. It was a bar in the seat of government because after they finished talking, they went upstairs and had drinks because the English like taverns. And this is where Washington said, goodbye, New York. Francis Tavern is at 54 Pearl Street, corner of Broad Street. Location played a prominent role in history before, during, and after the American Revolution. George Washington used it for his headquarters. There were peace negotiations there with the British. And of course, they were all English before. By the way, all these guys who signed the Declaration of Independence, were they patriots or traitors?
What was the question?
All these guys who signed, the 54 guys who signed the Declaration of Independence, traitors or patriots?
Well, they called themselves patriots, didn't
They were traitors.
Really?
They were all traitors. They were all English.
Oh,
They were all traitors.
yeah,
And also,
but they left, you know, like.
yeah, but they were
left
still
their
traitors. There were bounties on their heads
Oh,
because they
wow.
were traitors. That's why a war was fought. Anyway, the tavern also served as a seat of government for a while. After the British troops evacuated New York, November 25th, 1783, the tavern hosted a week later an elaborate turtle feast on December 4th in the building's long room for General George Washington, where he said goodbye to the officers of the Continental Army. Somebody said, how much did they pay for it? I said, I don't know. I looked it up, $700, which today would be like $10,000, $15,000 for a dinner. George didn't worry. He was, well, at least Martha was rich and he had her money. So he didn't worry about the cost of anything. Oh, how many of you saw Hamilton on Broadway? Anybody? Nobody? Well, you can see Hamilton for nothing. It was Hamilton who was the one who said to Thomas Jefferson, hey, we don't have to be the capital of the United States. In fact, take it where you want. We want the money. We want the money. We want the money. And Hamilton wanted New York to become the financial capital of the United States, and now it's the financial capital of the world. But you can see Hamilton for nothing in the Hamilton Custom House, which is really part of the Smithsonian. It's been renovated I've lived on the Lower East Side. My grandmother actually worked in this building, which looked like a dump. But it's really nice now with all this other stuff, and there's a piece of the Smithsonian Institution in there. The Compromise of 1790 let New York, where Hamilton lived. Do you know Hamilton founded Paterson, New Jersey? Hamilton was the guy, and he also founded the New York Post, which is the oldest newspaper, successful news. Well, I don't know how successful it is. It loses about $40 million a year now. But it is the longest running newspaper in the United States. So he said to Jefferson, we'll take the money, you take the capital. Hamilton played a central role in New York's development long before he was a character in a play. And there he is on the $10 bill. Hamilton in 1791 established the country's first national bank. 1792, he helped create the Coinage Act, which helped establish the United States Mint and the US dollar. But he went over to New Jersey because he and Aaron Burr really didn't like each other, and Burr challenged him to a duel, and like every other good, he wasn't really an Englishman, Hamilton. He was born in St. Nivens and ended up in Bermuda, and somehow Washington found him on the battlefield during the Revolution. But anyway, they had some words, and they couldn't have a duel in New York. It was against the law to have a duel in New York. So they went to New Jersey to have a duel. Except it was against the law in New Jersey as well. Hamilton was Vice President of the United States. The duel was fought in Waukegan, New Jersey on July 11th, 1804. The sitting Vice President was Aaron Burr, and Alexander Hamilton, the former Secretary of the Treasury. Well, they didn't like one another. It was a culmination of a long and bitter rivalry between the two, and somebody said something, and they said, I challenge you to a duel, and they accepted. So duels were illegal in both New York and New Jersey, but they decided, let's go to New Jersey. We'll have this out in New Jersey. The cause of the duel, disparaging remarks Hamilton allegedly made about Burr during a dinner. So here they are. They got their guns ready. Hamilton really, I don't know if he wanted to be involved in the duel, but accepted it. Hamilton and Burr, they pace off 10 steps, and Hamilton decides, I'm going to shoot at the sky. I don't want to do this. But he hit a tree branch directly above Aaron Burr's head, which fell. And Burr all of a sudden fires his shot. He hits Hamilton right here in his left rib cage. He was carried to the home of William Bayard Jr. He dies the next day. The Statue of Liberty said, come. And there's the Statue of Liberty, and there's me and my daughter on the day about 8 years ago when we decided, you know what, we've never seen the Statue of Liberty. We've never been to Ellis Island. We should go here. We live here, shouldn't we? All right? How many of you have been to the Statue of Liberty? You're in the same boat as I was. No, you weren't, because I had to take a boat over there. So anyway, Lady Liberty is a New Yorker. Anybody here from New Jersey? Lady Liberty is a New Yorker. She has her butt turned to New Jersey.
I thought she came from France.
She came from France, but she settled in New York. She is a New Yorker. Statue of Liberty enlightening the world was a gift of friendship from the people of France to the United States and is recognized as a universal symbol of freedom and democracy. Statue of Liberty was dedicated on October 28, 1886. It was supposed to be here in 1876 for the 100th anniversary of America, but it got delayed for 10 years. It was designated as a national monument in 1924, and Emma Lazarus has that poem that that basically welcomes you to the United States. And me and my wife, we are descendants from immigrants to the United States during a certain time period in the 19th and 20th century. And how about Ellis Island? You been there? How many have been to Ellis Island? Ellis Island's an interesting place. It's not very large, but it's an unparalleled destination in U.S. history. 12 million immigrants. So American shores came through Ellis Island. and it remains a symbol of what the American dream was to a period of a certain time. I know my family once said, we came here, we thought the streets were paved with gold. What were we doing on the Lower East Side? Well, trying to find trying to dance like Dorothy, following the yellow brick road in The Wizard of Oz. Jerry Stiller found the yellow brick road. Jerry Stiller, store in the mirror, my cousins. Anyway, welcome to America through America's Gate at Ellis Island. It was the gateway for 12 million people. It was the nation's busiest inspection station from 1892 to 1954. Some people came in through Boston. Some people came in through Galveston, Texas. Other people, there were some ports of entry in the West Coast. The island was made part of the Statue of Liberty National Monument in 1965, and has hosted the Museum of Immigration since 1990. Well, that's an old picture of my son. He's going to be 40 years old this year. And there are the Twin Towers. And I had been at the Twin Towers because I did eat at the top windows of the world. We could literally touch airplanes as they flew overhead. Up there, the Twin Towers. The worst terrorist attack on U.S. soil was September 11th, 2001. And the Trinity Church, Trinity St. Paul's Church, somehow survived. Somehow was literally untouched during the terrorist attack in 2001. The rear of St. Paul's Chapel faces Church Street, opposite the east side of the World Trade Center site. After the attack on September 11th, 2001, which led to the collapse of the Twin Towers, the St. Paul Chapel served as a place of rest and refuge for recovery workers at the WTC site. The St. Paul's Chapel, or the little chapel that stood, is an Episcopalian church that is located at 209 Broadway, between Fulton Street and Vesey Street. It's the oldest surviving church building in Manhattan. It's also the burial ground of Alexander Hamilton. For 8 hours, 8 months, hundreds of volunteers worked 12-hour shifts around the clock, serving meals, making beds, offering counseling, praying with firefighters, construction workers, police, and others, massage therapists, chiropractors, podiatrists, and musicians tended to their needs. The church survived without even a broken window, which is an amazing, amazing thing. There's another view of the new World Trade Center. That is from my old neighborhood, Lower East Side and East Broadway. And this is East Broadway looking, I went to school there on East Broadway when I was young, looking to the World Trade Center. Best looking building, in my opinion, in New York is the Chrysler Building. What do you say?
Yeah.
Yes or no?
Yes.
And then you get these pencil buildings. Just, I was looking at them on Sunday, just saying, they desecrate the skyline. It's like painting a mustache on the Mona Lisa. That's what these buildings remind me of. I mean, look at the beauty of this and that building. Oh, by the way, this is where I lived on the Lower East Side, 67 Eldridge Street, and it was one famous person who lived there. Ira Gershwin lived in that building about 1898. His brother George, he lived there a little before there. His brother George was born in 1897. So anyway, and there is that pencil building. It looks great. It looks like you could play bingo on it, doesn't it? Yeah, there's B30. David Hartman did a few shows on PBS. It was supposed to be called The Walking Tour of the Streets. One was going from the East River to the Hudson on 42nd Street, from the UN to close to the Intrepid Museum. And that is the United Nations, my wife in front of the United Nations, which was land that was once owned by Rockefeller. The Tolerance Museum is in the quote-unquote Superman building, which used to be the Daily News building on East 42nd Street, the Tolerance Museum. The Chrysler building there is also on 42nd Street. Grand Central Terminal, which was saved by Jackie Kennedy Onassis, It was scheduled for the wrecking ball because somebody wanted to build a high-rise on that plot of land. The New York Public Library is there, and here are the two lions. Well, here's one of the lions. I couldn't get the other one all that well, but there is the New York Public Library. And if you go to Bryant Park, there's Gertrude Stein, who once said of Oakland, there is no there there. Gertrude Stein, the writer. And the Crossroads of America, there it is, Times Square, and this is all going to be crowded tonight with people looking up here. Why would you want to just go there where you're pinned in, literally pinned in, to watch a ball drop?
I know.
And it's going to pour tonight.
I know.
But anyway, people are going to be there. And when you get to the Hudson River, you face New Jersey, which now is loaded with skyscrapers on the side. And that's looking down towards Jersey City from the Hudson River and 42nd Street. Anybody ever walk the High Line?
No, but it's nice.
Yeah, you've walked the High Line. Well, the High Line used to be a decrepit rail track, and it was revitalized. And other cities are doing this now. This was all done by private funding, and other cities around the world are now using their old railroad tracks to basically have a place to walk. The High Line opened in 2009. It's 1.45 miles. And it's a linear park on the elevated section of disused New York Central Railroad spur on the west, called the West Side Line. The High Line Park is built on the disused southern portion of the West Side Line running to the lower west side of Manhattan. It is connected to the Moynihan train station, which opened in, train station opened in 2003. Here's some New York humor. Stop praying. God's too busy to find you a parking spot. I was doing this the other day. I was giving a talk in the Upper East Side the other day, which is Christmas weekend, so you're able to get spots. But in the summer, you're able to get spots. The rest of the year, you say, God, I gotta be somewhere. And you're literally praying, God, find a spot, God, find a spot. But that's pretty funny. God's too busy to find you a parking spot. This used to be the best Bialy place in New York. How many of you like Bialys? So. This is Kosar's, and I used to know the owner, and they sold out. And the people who bought Kosar's are now franchising it. There's one on the Upper East Side. There's one by the High Line. But this used to be great. It used to be filthy. You could see the cockroaches and the dirt and all that. But you know what? They were good. And you knew that they were good because they never cleaned. They never cleaned. Anyway, so Kosar's Bialys. The pickle guys have outgrown this place on Essex Street, so they moved across the street. And I'm down there one day getting Bialys, and there's a tour bus that stops in front of this place. All these people are from the tour bus. They all got off the tour bus to buy pickles from the pickle guy. This used to be Gus's Pickles. I don't know how many of you remember Gus's Pickles. Remember Gus's Pickles? They used to have the barrels in front and all that other stuff. Well, they've outgrown this place, and they're in a bigger place across the street. You know what? The tour buses still stop there. How many of you have been down in Essex Street lately? It's all filled with high-rises now. All high-rises. You won't recognize the place. This is like 4 blocks long now, Little Italy. That's about it. It's like Mulberry Street up to Grand Street, down to Canal Street, and it's like nothing is there anymore. They've been priced out. So they've moved to Arthur Avenue. Oh, you can't miss these guys. Mr. Softy, fine dining. In fact, I was in Manhattan the other day. It's December, but it was a nice day on Sunday, and they were all out. The very best, Mr. Softy. Again, the Lower East Side, Ferraris, who's been there since 1898. And I wonder if they have the original cockroaches still there in Ferraris. It's the Lower East Side. You gotta expect cockroaches. Tell me, what's better than Mott Street in July? I'll take Manhattan. And there's Mott Street in July with all the push carts. Katz's? How many have been to Katz's? They weren't sure if they were there from 1888 or 1898. You know what they're doing in Katz's now? They're putting a high-rise on top of Katz's. They sold the building, but they have a lease now for next to nothing to keep Katz's delicatessen open. Yasha Schimmel's Knishes. They also have the original cockroaches. Oh, okay. Yona, you're right, Yona Schimmel. They also probably have the original cockroaches there. They've been there forever they've been there forever. Although they got A, that means they're clean. They're clean. They got an A rating over there. More fine. Remember devil dogs?
Sure.
Remember devil dogs and they're not owned by Drakes anymore. They've gone downhill since they're not owned by Drakes. I love Bugs Bunny. I mean, Bugs Bunny, I learned a lot of things in life from Bugs Bunny. There was a cartoon about Steve Brody, and Steve Brody jumping off the Brooklyn Bridge. And if you go down to the Bowery, and here's the cartoon Bowery Bugs, it's all about man survives leap from Brooklyn Bridge. Steve Brody probably didn't jump from the Brooklyn Bridge, but he was a vaudevillian who wanted to get some publicity, so he allegedly jumped from the Brooklyn Bridge, but it was a dummy that was in there. This is when banks were banks. Remember when banks were banks and they had the vaults and everything else? This is Canal Street, Broadway, lower Broadway, rather the Bowery. And this is when you walked in there, it was an HSBC, and what they did was desecrate the inside of the building. Because in the bank you were able to see, when I was a kid, the top, and then they put a roof on it, and a ceiling on there. But you know, these banks are now stores, the grocery stores in Cleveland. They retrofitted all these old banks with the thick walls and stuff. One's a CVS nearby, but these banks were banks. And there is the Empire State Building, and this was in May during a parade in May. And there's Central Park, and I said the other day I went through Central Park and checked out Cleopatra's Needle. In the Plaza Hotel, where the Beatles stayed, and where people tried to sneak in when the Beatles made their first appearance in the United States in February 1964. Museums, the Met, there you go. The American Museum with a V and a V of Natural History, where I was the other day, founded in 1869. And you got art and culture. My friend Gabaron, who is the artist, was having a display in Central Park of this in conjunction with the UN, and my wife decided, hey, you know what, I'll be part of that as well. And there is Cristobal Gabaron, who was a friend of mine, who's an artist from Spain, and he has a place on 38th Street in Manhattan, Gabaron. Central Park, again, you know, these buildings just, people in New York complain about these buildings because they cast a shadow onto Central Park. And basically you don't get the sunlight in Central Park anymore in Central Park South because of the shadows on these buildings. Museum Mile up on Fifth Avenue, City of New York. My daughter-in-law said to me, I said, we went to one of these museums, New York City Museum, and she said, oh, did you see the statue of Fred Lebow, the guy who founded the New York City Marathon? I said, why would I want to see a statue of Fred Lebow when I knew the guy and spoke to him? I said, I knew him before he was a statue. Perfect together, the Guggenheim and Mr. Softy. I think this guy has a permanent spot right there. I think he just leaves the truck there and it's always there. You will never go down Fifth Avenue and not see this Mr. Softy truck there. Doesn't matter, it could be a 10-inch snowstorm. That Mr. Softy truck is still there. And there's the naked cowboy, who you can spend $25 and take a picture of him, or you just take a picture of him from the back and say, there's the naked cowboy. Flatiron Building. You know what they're doing with the Flatiron Building now? They're renovating it. It's going to be condominiums. Condominiums, the Flatiron Building. There you go. Carvel. What is New York without Tom Carvel? Remember Tom Carvel and his commercials and that voice? Thank you, Tom Carvel. And TV. This is, I don't know if any of you watch MSNBC. It's Steve Kornacki. But I was on a show one day. He's now the head of the Connecticut Lottery. I don't know what Michael is doing now. We were doing a show over there at MSNBC, and we're in the green room going out there. And Charles Osgood, how many of you remember Charlie Osgood? And we were talking, this was his retirement party. My wife is there, and his retirement party. And he's leaving CBS. He's not doing the Sunday morning show anymore, but he doesn't know. I said to Charlie, why are we holding a retirement party? When are you retired? He said, I don't know. I said, what do you mean you don't know? He said, I'm waiting for an appointment for my knee replacement, then I'm going to retire. He was waiting for a knee replacement to retire, and there is Charlie Osgood. And Jerry Stiller, my cousin. How many of you remember Stiller and Mirror, the comedy team? Yeah, well, that's Jerry, my cousin. Do you know Jerry and I spent the night watching the O.J. Simpson chase, looking at each other saying, why? Why? Why are we watching this? And actually this afternoon, I'm going to this place to talk to Jerry Stiller and Ann Mirror. Gallery and theater, and there's Jerry, who is only that high, and Ann, and they have a son named Ben, who is named after great uncle Benny in Brooklyn, who was a stout guy who used to wear a tie all the time. And on that tie, he had the tie clip with the big initials BS. That's my family, the Stiller family. Anyway, so there is Jerry and Ann and me. Give my regards to Broadway. Remember me at Herald Square. Well, this isn't exactly Herald Square. This is in Times Square, but there is George M. Cohan. Catskills on Broadway. Anybody go to the Borscht Belt back in the day? This is my old friend Freddie Roman. My friend Max, who's a comic on cruise ships, and sent me a note the other day. It's Sid, I'm on Cozumel. I should jump off right now. I said, nah, then we can't get together. So anyway, Freddie Roman brought a play to Broadway called Catskills on Broadway, Mousy Lawrence and a whole bunch of others, commemorating the days of the Borscht Belt. Freddie Roman. And she likes the theater, and she always gets there late. My daughter never gets anywhere on time, my fair lady. How do you get to Carnegie Hall?
Practice.
Practice, practice, practice. That's how you get to Carnegie Hall, and these people are there. Obviously, they practice, practice, practice. Tin Pan Alley, Gershwin, and again, it's 67 Eldridge Street, where I lived until I was 8 years old, and Ira Gershwin lived in that building, and in those days, we did not have the air conditioners in the building. Also, there's my old friend, the late Charles Grodin. Remember Charles Grodin?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Chuck, there he is, and he's trying to convince us that what he wrote's a good play and should be on Broadway. Can you take a listen? Charlie? No, really wasn't. In Lincoln Center, and the Rainbow Room. Anybody been to the Rainbow Room? They're replacing these lights with LED lights now. They're getting rid of those old lights. And New Central, that was when I was on MSNBC there with Rob. I'll take Manhattan. Push carts. Push carts. Who's buried in Grant's tomb? Who's buried in Grant's? I feel like Groucho Marx. Who's buried in Grant's tomb?
General Grant.
No, he's not.
Not.
There's no tomb in there. It's a
Oh.
mausoleum.
Oh.
So it's not called, it's the General Grant National Monument.
That's why they
It's
have
not
to
a
do
tomb anymore. So if you went on, in fact, there is a show, You Bet Your Life, with Groucho Marx, where the contestants won no money, and Groucho, instead of asking what is the color of George Washington's white horse,
Right.
said, who's buried in Grant's tomb? And the guy said, nobody. Huh? Nobody. He and his wife were buried in the mausoleum above ground, so there is no tomb there.
That's cute.
And who's buried in Grant's tomb? Julia and Ulysses are entombed there. The Marx Brothers Playground is at 95th Street or 94th Street on the east side of Manhattan. And look who has a place named after him, James Cagney, East 91st Street. The Marx Brothers grew up near Jimmy Cagney. And by the way, Jimmy Cagney knew fluent Yiddish.
Wow.
Fluent Yiddish. You know why? Grew up in the Jewish neighborhood.
Yeah.
So he knew fluent Yiddish. Nevermore, The Raven, West 84th Street. Edgar Allan Poe Place. And if you watch Seinfeld, you know all about the soup Nazi, and the soup man is, the place used to be there. You don't see many of these anymore. There are a couple that float around Manhattan, but the old telephone. And graffiti, that's pretty good graffiti, isn't it?
Yeah.
The 5 train, that's in the Bronx, actually. And me and Yogi, how many of you remember Yogi?
Yeah.
Remember Yogi and I were friendly. We were
Oh.
friendly. He used to speak at his museum all the time. And of course, he was on TV all the time in the 1950s, whether he was playing with the Yankees or on What's My Line or Sergeant Bilko. The Mets, Yankees, Jets, Giants, Knicks, Rangers, Islanders, and Devils, Nets, Liberty, New York CFC, the Red Bull, St. John's, Seton Hall, New York City Marathon, Belmont State, US Open, all are in New York. And that is my limousine. Whenever in New York, I call for a limousine. That is my limousine. It takes me wherever I want. Well, most wherever I want, but how many of you have the same limousine as I do?
Used to.
Used
Not
to.
anymore.
Used to. And there's the Brooklyn Bridge. There it is, the Brooklyn Bridge. The Brooklyn Bridge is a hybrid cable-stayed suspension bridge. It's one of the oldest bridges of either type in the United States. By the way, if you ever go to Wheeling, West Virginia, on the Ohio-Pennsylvania border, there's the river there. There's a bridge that was built in about 1838 that looks exactly like the Brooklyn Bridge. It's closed now because that is one of the poorest areas in the country, and there's not enough money to restore the bridge so cars could go over it. Completed in 1893, it connects the boroughs of Manhattan and Brooklyn by spanning the East River. By the way, until 1898, New York City consisted of Manhattan and the Bronx.
Right.
Brooklyn was a separate city. If Brooklyn stayed a separate city, it'd be the 3rd biggest city in the United States today, behind Chicago and Los Angeles. Rather, Los Angeles and Chicago. The number 4 biggest city would be Queens in the United States. It has a main span of 1,595 feet, first wire steel suspension bridge constructed. It became a national landmark in 1964 and a national historic civil engineering landmark in 1972. And this is the glutton, this is the absolute most gross sports event, if you could call it a sports event in history, the hot dog eating contest. How many of you watch this guy? Isn't it gross?
Yes.
Yeah, it's gross. Anyway, Nathan's. How many of you been to Nathan's?
Yeah.
Nathan's, not the real Nathan's over on Coney Island, Surf Avenue. The hot dog eating contest, sponsored by Nathan's Famous Hot Dogs, the world's competitive eaters. 10 minutes of glory every 4th of July, televised nationally and internationally. Can you imagine people actually watch these people eat hot dogs? Think of it. Would you want people watching you eat a hot dog?
Got 85 of them.
Yeah, yeah. And there's Coney Island, there is the old parachute jump, which doesn't work anymore. Between 1880 and World War II, Coney Island was the largest amusement area in the United States. There was a decline. During 1966, developers tried to revitalize Coney Island's boardwalk as an amusement area. Fred Trump destroyed the Steeplechase Park Pavilion of Fun during a highly publicized ceremony that September. He took an axe and wrecked the steeplechase. Coney Island and the parachute. Fred Trump, anybody live in the Trump building, by the way? Okay, nobody lived there, okay. Proposed the building a 160-foot high enclosed dome with recreational facilities and convention center. It was rejected, but he destroyed the steeplechase. In 2012, Hurricane Sandy caused major damage to Coney Island. The amusement parks, the aquarium, and businesses. Luna Park at Coney Island reopened as scheduled on March 24th, 2013. The building of the aquarium started early 2013, and there was some expansion, and it opened in the summer of 2018. That is Brooklyn. Brooklyn, that's what people call it, looking at Manhattan. Hey, egg cream, anybody? Anybody want an egg cream?
Of course.
Yeah,
of
get it
course.
here.
Yeah.
They make them here.
They make them here?
Yeah.
Do
Sure.
they use Fox's Ube?
I don't know.
This is
Probably
the
not.
best.
Yeah.
This is the best, Fox's Ube.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you about a lecture I went to once about seltzer. 50 minutes of seltzer. 50 minutes of somebody talking about seltzer. Remember the bottles?
Sure.
They're collector's items now, these.
wow.
They're hard to come by now. But there is a guy in Brooklyn who still delivers seltzer using those bottles.
Wow.
Bottle like I'm about ready to spit you with. He spent, and by the way, they did have egg creams. Are there any eggs in egg creams?
No.
No,
No. No.
no, no.
There's no eggs in egg.
What did he say?
Are there any eggs in it?
What is it made of? Seltzer water and
vanilla?
chocolate. 2-cent plain. How many remember 2-cent plain? 2-cent plain, right? 2-cent plain.
Close.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, you walked in, 2-cent plain. Staten Island Ferry, Queens, well, there's the Unisphere. If each of the New York City boroughs were an independent city, Queens would be the nation's 4th biggest city after Los Angeles, Chicago, and Brooklyn. Queens is the most ethnically diverse urban area of the world. 138 languages are in the borough. The Mets, my wife sung at Kennedy Center and she was on Broadway. She never made it to the Met. Well, actually, she did make it to the Met. She sung the national anthem before a Mets game there. There are museums, Kennedy and LaGuardia Airport, Flushing Meadows, Corona Park. The Mets, the U.S. Open tennis tournament takes place next to the park. It's the home of Kaufman Astoria Studios, Silver Cup Studios, Aqueduct Racetrack, not for much longer because they're going to basically get rid of the racetrack. And there were 2 World's Fairs there. The 39-40 World's Fair and the 64-65 World's Fair. That's a World's Fair museum. And you figured they'd have stuff from 39-40, but guess what? They really don't. Walt Disney's Playground was the 1964-65 World's Fair. I don't know if any of you remember the Talking Abe Lincoln in the Illinois
Yes.
Pavilion.
Yeah.
That's Walt Disney's idea.
Right,
And he
yeah.
moved it to his amusement parks. It's a Small World was created for the 64-65 World's
Right.
Fair, developed by Disney with the UN Children's Fund or UNICEF.
Right.
It was a huge hit for 2 years at the fair, shipped to Anaheim's Disneyland Park in California, opened May 28, 1966. The Bronx Zoo. I mean, you've been to the Bronx Zoo.
I worked there.
You worked there.
When I was in high school.
You were in high school, and of course there is Arthur Avenue, which is still sizable. And then you go to City Island, and I found this was an interesting place. You could eat at the restaurant and make travel reservations at City Island, at this restaurant. In the Lobster Box, anybody ever been to the Lobster Box? That's over there. The Bronx is the home of the United States' largest metropolitan animal park, the Bronx Zoo, the New York Botanical Gardens, and Yankee Stadium. Little Italy is on Arthur Avenue and around there. Meat markets, delis, vegetable stands, fish markets, cafes, and restaurants. Here's one thing from New Jersey that always got me. This is the Princeton Art Museum. Have you seen those boxes at Costco or boxes like that at Costco that they rip apart? And you put your stuff in the box to bring home? Why is this thing worth millions of dollars? This Brillo box by Andy Warhol. I see, how many of you have seen things like that? But Andy Warhol stuff is in the Princeton Art Museum. There is Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah.
What makes this so valuable? You can go to Costco and get the same box for nothing. For nothing. Andy Warhol was a genius. Absolute genius. So, what did you used to listen to on New Year's Eve? Guy Lombardo.
Yeah.
Old Lang Syne. From the Waldorf. Old Lang Syne. Tonight it's not going to be played anywhere. At least not by a band in the Waldorf, because the Waldorf is now condominiums. Anyway, Old Lang Syne is the song English-speaking world uses to welcome in the new year. Combines to know the merriment with a sense of loss. Guy Lombardo and his Royal Canadians played it every New Year's Eve broadcast nationally from the Waldorf. It wasn't the Waldorf in 1929. The Waldorf used to be where the Empire State Building is and then moved to where they are now in the 1930s, from 1929 to 1976. Variety magazine called Lombardo the only Canadian ever to create an American tradition. Old Lang Syne. And with that, I wish you a happy and healthy New Year. I will see you next year, a couple weeks away. And any questions or comments about New York? Anybody have anything to tell?